This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
Can I welcome members and officers here at City Hall and the public in the gallery watching or on the webcast to today's meeting of the GLA Oversight Committee. Since the previous meeting of the committee, Assembly Member Hall has stepped down and has been replaced by Assembly Member Boff, as agreed at the London Assembly plenary meeting on the 7th of September 2023. Can we record our thanks to Assembly Member Hall for her time on the committee, and a big oversight welcome to Assembly Member Boff. You'll be so glad you've joined us.
I'm already delighted.
Please, may I remind participants to turn your phones off or put them on silent, and can I also ask members to ensure there are no electronic devices in front of your microphones? Can I ask the clerk, Nicoletta Kemp, to confirm any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for absence have been received from Assembly Member Pigeon, for whom Assembly Member Bakari is substituting, from Assembly Member Sahota, for whom Assembly Member Desai is substituting, and from Assembly Member McCartney.
Thank you. Moving on to declarations of interest, can we list the note of offices held by Assembly members? And can I ask members if they have any disclosable pecuniary interest in specific items listed on the agenda? Perfect. Can we confirm the minutes of the meeting of the committee on 20th of June and the 12th of July 2023 to be signed by me as a correct record? Thank you. And can we note the completed, closed and ongoing actions arising from previous meetings of the GLA Oversight Committee? Thank you. And can I ask the committee to note the following recent activity or action, taken by the chairman in consultation with the deputy chair and party group lead members under delegated authority, to agree the committee's letter to the head of facilities management, GLA, regarding the restructure of the facilities management unit, and to agree up to £3,000 for the purpose of hosting the Parliamentary and Assembly Procedural Officials Network, PAPON, Conference 2023. Noted that was. Yeah, I thought that one needed a reminder. So. It's a test, isn't it? Another test. On to the main business for today. Welcome to the panel. We have Shirley Rodrigues, the Deputy Mayor for Environment and Energy, Catherine Barber, Assistant Director for Environment and Energy, and Enver, Acting Chief Finance and Assistant Director to Group and Performance. And there's somebody else here as well. But there's no.
Hi, I'm Ken Roykel-Neck-Reed, Head of Impact Investment and Analysis for Group Treasury.
Okay, and many thanks for joining us as well.
I think it's so unfair that Kenroy doesn't have a proper nameplate. Can we not? Yes, we need a Sharpie. I think.
Should we whip one up quickly?
Yeah.
I think. On this.
So let's promote him to having a nameplate.
Yeah. The first question is, who's got a Sharpie? Yeah. Okay. So, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Shirley, first question is for you. What progress has been made on the green finance since you last appeared in front of this committee in November?
Thank you, Chair. Huge progress since, I think...
Could you just do the mic, please? Sorry.
Huge progress since, I think, officers were in front of the committee, I think, last November. As you're aware, last February, the Mayor announced plans for a green bond programme, aiming to issue a £500 million green bond supported by £90 million worth of GLA funding to support the project development and cost of finance. As many of you will recall, the the economic instability last summer, following a certain budget, made market conditions really unfavourable, in particularly for green bonds. So the GLA's planned green bond issuance was paused whilst we worked out an interim way of taking forward the proposals that the Mayor had. So what the Mayor has done is worked on establishing a green finance fund, same ambition, but using other resources available to the GLA that we're aiming to refinance later through green bond proceeds once that's able to proceed, and if favourable rates or other sources of funding can be secured. Earlier this year, we've been working on developing and then published in April the draft Green Finance Framework, which sets out the governance framework and the project eligibility criteria. We will be, intending to launch a green bond once and if market conditions improve, and proceeds from that would be deployed via this Green Finance Fund. And that all lending under the Green Finance Fund is in line with that green bond framework to make sure that's possible. The Green Finance Fund was then launched at London Climate Action Week in June, and the first window for expressions of interest to the Green Finance Fund is currently open. It closes tomorrow, the 29th of September, and we're looking forward to reviewing the applications. So lots of progress on the fund, less so on the green bond for the reasons I've stated, and then I'm sure Catherine and Enver and Kenroy can talk a little bit more about the detail, but we've also been working to staff up the environment team who are working on that, LTL colleagues and finance colleagues have been working very hard on that, and I just wanted to thank everyone in the environment team, the green finance team, Enver's team and Kenroy and Luke at LTL for all the work that they've been doing to really push this ahead. It's phenomenal progress for something that is really needed, but is very complicated. So, we had to take the due process, basically, to make sure the fiduciary duty, statutory obligations, and so on were taken into account.
Thanks. And Catherine, this may be for you more than Shirley. On that last point around the applications, do you know how many applications have been received in this tranche?
So we'll know that tomorrow, and we're happy to update the committee afterwards.
Okay. Is there not a ballpark at the moment about?
So we've had contacts with all of the boroughs. We know that some are definitely putting in applications, others are possibles. I think it does take time for people to get used to a product when it's new. Essentially, the Green Finance Fund is a new product on this market. We've had to explain what sort of projects can apply, the kinds of terms and conditions that we'd be offering, why it's worth coming to us rather than taking out Public Works Loan Board, borrowing, etc. So it takes a while to warm up. We know we'll get some applications from within the GLA group, some from boroughs. We'll see beyond that.
Thank you. And I think probably following on from what you're about to say there is if you could outline the difference between the Green Bond Programme and the Green Finance Fund.
So essentially, as Shirley said, we looked originally to finance this by borrowing through the issuance of a green bond. The market conditions for that weren't favourable over the last year, but the Mayor didn't want to wait on supporting decarbonisation or other environmental projects, and so has made money available out of the GLA's own reserves. That's why we're calling it a fund for now. It's possible that later we will refinance it by issuing a green bond. So the sorts of projects that we're talking about are the same. They are in renewable energy, energy efficiency, clean transportation, etc. And we've issued a draft green bond framework that was published in April. And that means that everything that we do is consistent with green bond principles. So if we get to a stage where the market is ready for green bond issuance, everything we're doing under the fund, we could then go out and say, this meets all of the standards and expectations. We now want to release this as a bond. But for now, we're calling it a fund, the same sorts of impacts and projects.
And following on from that as well, do you have any current thinking about the scale, timing, cost and structure of how the green bond bit may come about and what it may look like?
Yes,
and
I mean, as I'll try that one. I think as Catherine's outlined, I think the way to look at this, the green bond program, in effect, it's how we go to the market to borrow up to 500 million. And the Green Finance Fund is the mechanism through which we deploy that money. So the Green Finance Fund has the governance around, and set out the categories for financing project. So it's a continuum, is that we go to market. So the ambition is to secure up to 500 million from the bond market, subject to improved market conditions. But we're also looking at other sources as well in the event that doesn't materialize. Because if we don't get to the point where it's economically viable to borrow from the bond market, we need to actually look at other sources to provide the finance for this. So it could be up to 500 million.
Thank you. I had an indication from Assembly Member Russell.
Yes, it's just a point of clarification on Catherine's answer to the first question, because you said, I think, that when boroughs and others are considering whether to take up the this way of financing things, so the green finance or the Public Works Loan Board, how people can make a distinction between those two. And I just wondered if you could just say a little bit more about that, because presumably we need to understand why people would go for your green finance initiative rather than the Public Works Loan Board.
So there are a number of things that I hope would make us attractive. Our wider work on low carbon finance, it also includes the work of our accelerators. So we engage both within the GLA group with public authorities outside the GLA group as well, including local authorities, to help them develop projects, and we do that with the Mayor's funding and up to now also with EU funding, that finishes this year. And that's a well-established scheme, but people are then within our ecosystem, they know us, they talk to us about what their plans are. We always say that we will provide finance competitively. We know that, for example, local authorities have access to PWLB, so you would expect them to get at least a slim discount on that, but we don't want to, obviously, to offer too much if they are making savings or getting a payback from their investments. We're then not offering a generous subsidy on top of that, they just don't need it. But there are criteria that we apply to decide whether to then reach into the £75 million that the Mayor has made available to accompany, so that there's the 500 million of financing which we can offer as loans, but then to make that an attractive package, either by helping to sort of spread when the repayments have to come in, or to make the interest rate a bit more attractive. We can use some of that £75 million to soften it a bit, to make it an attractive proposition. But we only do that when the cost savings or the payback from the projects are not themselves sufficient, just to make it a kind of attractive proposition. So if they need that interest rate subsidy to make that a viable proposal. And then we also look for proof of additionality, so that the project wouldn't have gone ahead if we hadn't been helping out with that, some of the Mayor's money for that. And then we also have metrics, for example, about tonnes of carbon per pound invested. So there are various criteria. We don't hand out the money too easily.
Thank you.
Thank you. Assembly Member Fortune.
Thank you. Very quickly, Catherine, I may have missed it. Assembly Member Best asked if you've had any applications in so far, and you said you're expecting some tomorrow. And listen, I always got my essays in late, so I completely get that. Have you had any yet?
Yes, so I suppose I should draw the committee's attention to the fact that we have financed some projects already. We have
the two I know of, yeah.
So we've financed three. And that's up to £185 million. And so what is coming in next will be the first round of expressions of interest. We started within the GLA group, so we've made commitments to TfL and to LLDC. And then beyond that, we've been reaching out to the boroughs, to NHS, further education institutions, etc. And that's what we're calling round one. That's what closes tomorrow.
Yeah, good. So I knew about the two of those. Yeah. I didn't know there were three. I read about the two. But have you had any in so far outside of that?
I'm afraid I haven't opened the box. My colleagues may have taken a look. I know we're going to get some. We're very confident about that. Whether the boroughs and others have hit send, okay. I'll confirm that after tomorrow's deadline.
But we don't know if there's been any.
Well, the deadline hasn't yet passed, so I don't.
Okay, but all right. Okay.
Thank you. And Catherine, quickly, if on that £180 million limit, if there is a project that, say, is an amazing project but £190 million, how much flex is there within the scheme? Or Shirley, is that a question for you?
I think it's probably more a question of Enver. I think we've got a budget, so I think we would be looking to adjust, I guess, and really review the project. But I think over to Enver to decide that.
Just to sort of clarify the numbers, so we've out of the 500, we've allocated 185. So there's 315 left, not 180. And so it would have to come in wanting more than 315 million on one scheme. I doubt we'll get one that big. If we do, we'll look at how we prioritise. At the moment, the limit is 500 million. So I'd rather we have the lucky problem of being oversubscribed. At the moment, we've been asking for applications and haven't been in that luxurious position of having too much choice. So we'll cross that bridge if we get to it. But the limit is 500 million, and I can't give you a bigger number than that right now.
Thank you. Assembly Member Cooper.
Well, luckily, we seem to have explored some of my questions already. Can't imagine how that could possibly have happened to Assemblymember Fortune. What environmental projects, this is to the Deputy Mayor, do you think that the 500 million Green Finance Fund should be funding? What would you like to, in an imaginary parallel universe where you have complete choice, what would you like? And everyone's applying, massively oversubscribed.
Well, there are three categories: energy efficiency, transportation, and renewable energy. So those are the ones we've identified because those are where the biggest emissions reductions can happen, and because we targeted the functional bodies initially and then expanded it to hospitals, universities and so on, it's largely around their estates and their fleet decarbonisation, so areas where they have control over. So we would expect to see those coming in. The huge issues about retrofitting buildings, trying to retrofit with renewable energy, and then obviously cleaning up and decarbonising our fleets and all the accompanying infrastructure, all things that those bodies are grappling with. There isn't enough finance in their own budgets, which is why bringing forward a funding facility or green fund like this is helpful, but we know this isn't enough. We need to do much more, as do government, and many other cities are obviously looking at this.
And we will be looking to the 500 million going only on capital expenditure. These are all going to be CapEx projects.
That's right.
Okay. So in terms of the transportation, which you mentioned, I understand that there are certain projects, well, not just transportation, but that you've excluded energy from waste infrastructure projects. You've also excluded fossil fuel boilers being reinstalled, vehicles powered through fossil fuel combustion, and ethanol or brown, black or blue hydrogen. What about biofuels? Are they ruled in or ruled out?
Can I? Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Go for it.
They're not on our list of exclusions, but we would want to see evidence of environmental benefit, and we also ask questions of environmental harm. So I think we take that on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, because like hydrogen, some people will categorise certain forms of hydrogen as green hydrogen, and the same with biofuels. Some are green biofuels as opposed to ones that are possibly unsustainable, like shipping in pellets from Canadian forests across the sea. I won't mention who does that because I'm sure we all know. And so you were saying that 185 million has been allocated already, and I wondered if you could just set out for us what that money has gone to. Is that to these two big projects?
The two big projects are the solar membrane on the Olympic Stadium roof, which is, they're looking at the moment, and the other is to ULEZ related infrastructure, and then I think some of it is earmarked, for other TfL projects. I think you've got the detail, haven't you?
There's the two big ones are with TfL. One is the ULEZ one, and then there's one around the LED lighting at stations and various programs like that. And then the third one is the membrane at the stadium.
And could you break down the 185 million between those three projects approximately?
150 for the ULEZ.
150 for ULEZ.
Just under. And it was about 30 for the other TfL projects, and then 5 for the membrane.
5?
Yeah.
Just 5?
Yeah.
Okay. And does that require planning permission?
The membrane?
The membrane.
Yes.
Well, they're doing it, so I'm assuming that they've got whatever
I think
building.
Ken Roy's shaking.
Yeah, you can.
Yes, it does, and they have actually been going through the process of securing that.
And do we know any other stadiums that have had that sort of membrane installed elsewhere, either in London or outside London? I seem to remember seeing somebody talking about one on the news, but or is this a whole new technology?
Yeah.
I'm not aware, but it is relatively sort of new technology, and you know, sort of they've done a lot of feasibility to ensure that it works and would fit. And I think if it doesn't prove, you know, to be feasible, well, the feasibility study have indicated that it is, but I think it would be, you know, sort of quite a significant, you know, sort of technology to apply elsewhere, particularly for those building and properties that have uniquely shaped roofs and particular roofs that are constrained by the amount of weight that they can take.
Sure. Maybe not good to put on a building that is made out of rack, for example, because that might not be very efficacious. I'm going to assume that you are not going to be able to tell me, I'm going to look at Catherine for this one, what projects are currently being considered, because the closing date is tomorrow and we haven't opened the application box. But what sort of targets do you have for the timing of the allocation of funding after you open the box tomorrow and you're inundated with all of these applications that fall into the correct categories, hopefully?
So we'll have to see what we get in. We've said previously that we wanted to have 2 waves or 2 rounds of collecting project ideas by the end of this financial year, and I hope that will still be the case. Of course, it depends what we get back. If we're completely oversubscribed and we allocate everything through round 1, then job done. But I'd be surprised if that happens. Assuming not, we've got what we get in tomorrow, and then any further projects probably in the new year. So we've now allocated 185. I think we'd be doing pretty well if half of the money was allocated by the end of this financial year, but I'm speculating at this point. You know, we'll see what we get tomorrow.
And we will presumably be measuring the projects that we decide that the decision is made to allocate money to in terms of the environmental benefits. So presumably tons of carbon that don't end up in the atmosphere, but because we're also looking at mobility related projects, will we also be measuring reduction in particulate matter 2.5 and 10 and also NOx? So we will have a full set of indicators to see all of the benefits that will flow from the projects.
Yeah, and we've also looked at, sorry Catherine, I was jumping in, but because we're asking for looking at co-benefits as well, there'll be other things that we might be able to report on as well, depending on the project, whether it's impact on vulnerable areas, you know, in terms of climate adaptation or green space or whatever comes through, I think.
But you will be developing a matrix so that we can assess the projects against each other, as well as just being able to see that they have major general improvement.
We're certainly going to be reporting on the improvements, whether it's a matrix, I'm not sure, but I have to leave that to maybe Ken Roy can answer.
Yes, we have set out core indicators that we expect. We ask the projects to report against, and you know, we'll be doing. I think it was mentioned at the meeting last week that we'll be doing an impact reporting, annual impact reporting on all the projects that we've supported under the scheme.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Could I just confirm, when we keep saying that the previous project was ULEZ infrastructure, what parts was that?
What parts of ULEZ infrastructure? I think it's the infrastructure was like signage largely. Cameras.
It's the infrastructure to facilitate the expansion. So you know, sort of the signage, cameras, as well as the IT infrastructure that's necessary. So those are the key bits that were actually financed under the scheme.
Okay, thanks. I wondered if it was talking about signage, because I just get confused every morning when I step out of my house and it tells me I've got a mile to get into the ULEZ zone, and I'm in it. So I wonder perhaps if we need to take another look at signage. Assemblymember Prince, did you want to come in still?
Yeah. Thank you. I just had a question around KPIs. Are there going to be any KPIs around any of this at all?
Well, there's a KPI of trying to spend all the, I think it's 500 million, the 200 million, yes, initially. But then I think there are a series of KPIs, and Catherine, I think I'm trying to find the bit of paper that says it, if you've got it to hand.
It's fine. So the key metrics are carbon savings. Decarbonisation is the Mayor's top priority. But we've talked about other potential environmental impacts, whether that's NOx, PM 2.5, PM 10, etc. savings. There may be other things that people come forward with. So we'll be tracking those energy savings as well, of course, for the energy efficiency projects. And we do have a threshold, kind of the minimum value for money that we would accept for tonnes of carbon per pound invested. And one of the things that we're doing is also benchmarking some of those other environmental indicators to look at how other green bond issuers or other cities or states have done that. I'll say that generally in energy savings per pound or carbon savings per pound are quite familiar. Where it comes to air quality improvements or biodiversity improvements per pound, there's less out there to compare ourselves against. So, we may be at the forefront of that, but we're looking at that now.
And will you be publishing those KPIs?
So, as Kenroy said, we'll publish the metrics at the in the annual report. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. And I'm going to hand over to Assemblymember Bakari, but before I do, I should have said that Shirley's only with us for the hour. So if anyone was bursting at the seams to ask Shirley a question, then get your hands up before 3 o'clock. Assemblymember Bakari.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to the question on the list for green financing, in the green bond principles, which are the GLA basis, its green financial framework, the International Capital Market Association actually lists sustainable water and wastewater management as one of the key areas that could be focused on, but it's not on the list. Given the Mayor's limited powers, elsewhere to intervene with the pollution in London's rivers, don't you think this is a missed opportunity, to finance some projects that could actually be really helpful right now?
I think, as we've said, we're trying to focus on the areas that are really that we know are top of sort of the ways of reducing emissions in order to then reduce the impacts of climate change. So the energy efficiency, transport, renewable energy. We have said that we want to look at sort of thematic funds, for example, around nature-based solutions. But our focus really is trying to get the water companies to really focus on delivering their responsibilities in this area in terms of river pollution and sustainable urban drainage and so on. So there's a number of sort of other areas where we're pressing them and governments. But absolutely, and it's something that we've asked the Green Finance Institute, who I think are also looking at nature-based solutions. It's a big issue, and we know the rough cost of what we think is going to be to deal with mitigation and the net zero target. The number for how we can adapt London, just like many other cities, we absolutely have no idea, and that's really one of the things that, for example, the Mayor has asked Emma Howard-Boyd, who's chairing the London Climate Change Impacts Resilience Review, to have a look at it as part of her evidence gathering with insurance companies and others. We know globally it's in the trillions. There is so much that needs to happen on adaptation. So it's right that we start thinking about how we look at nature-based solutions and other adaptation mechanisms.
Great, thank you. And I also want to ask you, Shirley, about the green bond being a one-off measure, or are you anticipating further use of debt funding in the future?
I think we need to, again, I'll defer to Enver and Kenroy on this, but, we want to look at what is feasible for London. We know we can't do this through public finance. We have to look at private finance, investment, debt, all of these sort of various measures. But what's appropriate for London, what's appropriate for each sector will need to be taken into account, I think. And obviously the impact on borrowing limits and repayments and so on. But, I'm going to leave Enver and Kenroy maybe to fill you in a bit more on that.
I think you've answered it really well, actually. So I was going to say that we just need to be cautious about how much we borrow. So some of the money that we've already lent out, for example, to TfL and ULEZ, that's got an expected payback of 4 years. So that's quite short term, whereas the membrane's 18 years. So our, excuse the pun, but our plan is to recycle that money when it comes back. We can't keep lending sort of 500 million here and 500 million there and leaving the GLA's credit rating at risk. So that's where my job comes in, to sort of say, yes, this
Yeah,
stuff's
I can
important.
appreciate that it's all kind of new territory. I mean, Enver or Shirley could answer this, but the GFI London Finance Climate Report circulated to this committee suggests that the GLA should be looking into other options of external borrowing. I'd like to know a little bit more about that. Would you consider, now I was really intrigued by this, the Islamic bonds and the performance bonds, and what's your thinking about that?
If I probably start with the performance bonds, this is certainly one of the things that we, I think it's generally sort of referred to as sustainable linked bonds, and we'd certainly consider a wide variety of options, including the sustainable linked bonds. But I think we settled on a green bond because of the sort of flexibility that provides, as opposed to the sustainable link, where you have specific KPIs that you have to hit, and if you don't, you could be penalised. Alternatively, if you do, then financially you could be better on. But given that we didn't have a full influence over what projects eventually would come forward, we'd rather keep that sort of flexibility which the green bond provided.
I mean, I was intrigued by the Islamic bonds. Have you looked into that and whether that would fit the criteria that you have?
I think we haven't looked into a wide detail of it, and it's probably something that we sort of maybe explore. But but just back to in terms of what we were trying to do here was sort of in terms of the green bond and the flexibility that those principles and the ICMA, the International Capital Markets Association principle, provide. Given, unlike sort of when you issue a green bond, you have a specific project or group of projects in mind. What we were having here is a loan fund scheme where a wide variety of projects, albeit in 3 categories, would come in, but quite a wide variety. So we wanted to make sure that whatever system we set up was flexible enough to accommodate that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Assembly Member Fortune.
Thank you. Enver, just picking up on something you said there, that the TfL payback is 4 years.
That's what it says in the business case. It's on that basis that we've lent it.
Is that challenging?
Don't know yet, do I? It's too early.
It's whose problem does it become, I suppose? All right, but I think I read somewhere cash balances are still about 2.5 billion, so there's plenty of cash.
Yeah.
Okay. Shirley, regarding some of the projects, those projects that do very well, will they be in a position to cross-subsidise those that perhaps aren't performing financially?
That's the sort of recycling of savings issue, isn't it? Yeah, if that's possible, I think. But I think we know these projects are difficult because retrofitting a hospital and so on, the payback period we just heard for just the solar membrane is tough. I think our focus is going to make sure, just to be on making sure that people do pay back and then looking to other sources of finance to boost that fund, I think. But again, Enver or Kenroy, you've probably got more to say on this.
Yes, I mean, I think the approach that we've actually taken for this, recognizing the issue of sometimes the inability of projects to pay back or the savings that they might generate won't cover. So our primary focus, therefore, is more rather than providing project finance, which would probably make it difficult to actually make the case. We're more providing finance akin to corporate finance, so we're looking at the entity itself as in the main from a payback perspective, as opposed to so the broader question then is from an organizational perspective, they might be able to actually, if they generate a savings on one project, that might be able to subsidise, another project within looking from the perspective of someone who will borrow from us.
Okay, so that vehicle is there, but it sounds like there's still a little bit more thinking to do on it, and it's going to depend on kind of the output of some of these projects, I suppose. And then we're looking at some of the projects and the way they're being, and how success is being measured is going to be in that carbon reduction. So if we see that we funded a project and it isn't delivering those reductions in carbon that we want, what happens then?
So that is actually in the responsibilities of the steering committee, and I think we circulated the terms of reference before this meeting. So they do have within that, I think the idea that if a project is not performing according to the objectives of the Green Finance Fund, that can be withdrawn.
Okay, and then is there any expectation for money to be paid back or returned to the GLA?
Yep.
Are there, there'll be insurance policies in place, right? And
I think our preference would be trying to work with organisations to actually try and deliver this. We certainly don't want to be punitive. So it's part of the job that my team and the environmental team will be doing is to work in very closely to monitoring how things are progressing with these projects to make sure that they can, and so certainly one of the things that we do at the outset is to try and to test the feasibility of what's been said to ensure that we don't get to that stage.
We do recognise there's an opportunity cost, so that's why the feasibility approach is really tough, which is why when we look at the applications that come in tomorrow, it will take some time to make sure that we're really confident that they are going to be the ones that we want and they meet the objectives and that they can deliver the savings and so on.
Honestly, I recognise the inherent risk in some of this technology that may be sort of innovative and sort of new to market as well. Last one from me. I think there's is it a 36-month period in terms of delivery where there is an opportunity, is there not, to fund projects that have already been delivered? Am I correct in that assertion? And for people to apply for that, would they go through the same sort of application windows?
Yeah. I think maybe what you're referring to is the sort of what they call the look back period that's referred that's mentioned in the draft framework. Yeah. It's sort of a standard condition within the bond market. Whereby you can finance projects. If you go to the bond market to secure funding, that funding can be used to finance projects that have started sort of up to 3 years ago. So you can refinance projects that have started up to 3 years ago. So we have actually included that in our draft framework. It's there as an option, because one of the things while putting this together is we, as I mentioned previously, because of the not having a full control over the nature of the projects coming through, we wanted things to be as flexible as possible. So we try and create a framework to facilitate that. Whether we'll use it or not sure yet. We haven't got anything up to that length of period, but it's just the flexibility to have if necessary.
I was going to ask Catherine. Oh, sorry, go on.
Well, I was just going to say, obviously we want to fund new projects, and the work that Catherine's team through the accelerators work is to identify, new projects from boroughs, universities and so on. Through the accelerators, identifying potential projects and encouraging them and helping them with business cases so they're feasible and can apply preferably to us or Public Works Loans Board or whatever. Also the work that we've been doing through the 3CI in the Net Zero National Pipeline. There's many of those projects sort of sit in both camps, I guess, because everybody's looking for any source of financing. So I wouldn't want to leave you with the fact that just thinking people are just going to come in with projects that were already funded. We are very, focused on trying to encourage that pipeline, because without that pipeline, the markets don't have the confidence that there are projects there to finance. So we need that as well as the finance coming forward.
Well, that's what I was going to ask then, but I think maybe Kimroy answered it, but I'll double check, which was the late homework being delivered tomorrow. Is any of that going to fall into this sort of look back applications that you're expecting?
It could do. I mean, that would be within the scope of the eligibility of the fund. It won't be late if it comes in tomorrow. Only after that, then we'll be, waving our fingers at people.
11:59, I used to send mine.
Yeah, I suppose just to say, we circulated the mission and objectives for the fund of the Green Finance Programme, and the Mayor has made it clear that he wants to accelerate decarbonisation in London. I think, sitting on the Credit Committee, if I received 2 identical proposals, but one of them was something that happened 2 years ago and another one was going to happen, but it needed some help from the GLA to finance it. If it was a new project, then that for me would take priority, because it would be more in line with the Mayor's goals.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a last question from me on this section. When we were here in November 2022, we talked about, in relation to the green bond element, creating market excitement around this. Do you think there has been market excitement around?
I'll start with when we launched it at London Climate Action Week. We did it at the 3CI event, which had a huge buzz, actually. Lots of investors, developers, consultants, local authorities, government officials. Catherine talked about the bond after I'd done the sort of opening. But certainly the conversations I had with people were people were pleased that it was happening, really recognised the need for it and wanting to do more. And I think, as ever, and I'm sure Enver and Kenroy are much more closely involved in this world. They are excited, but I think desperate for more investment, I think, and wanting to do more. But I think needing to understand what the pipeline is and what the sort of macro conditions are, at government level, the market context and so on.
And Catherine, is that something you would agree with, that there's market excitement?
I think I agree up to that point. I do think, and I'm not trying to get political, but I think investors would also want to say that there's a bit of alignment and congruence between at local government level and at national government level, that any investment that they're making in particular, like renewable energies or any particular themes, are supported all the way through. And so just being at the climate budget session for the last 3 days with 13 other countries, the outlook from the outside looking in now is that confidence probably isn't there as much as it might have been a few weeks ago, to back investors to think this is a good thing to go into, because it might not have the same kudos as it might have done a few weeks ago. So that hasn't been proven by any facts. It's just a perception that was fed back to us by other countries from the outside.
Thanks. And I'm going to go to Assembly Member Cooper for the next section, but were you going to ask any questions of Shirley? Because
I might do.
Okay. I was going to try and let you go early, but
it's fine. I'm here.
I haven't been known.
That's no problem.
Okay.
I might do. I have been known to ask the Deputy Mayor a few questions.
Oh no.
In the past, and I suspect it may happen in the future. I just have one question actually that I just wanted to start with. Then we want to move on to talk a bit about the governance, and I think the details of the people on the Green Finance Steering Committee were sent to us a bit of time ago in the past. And I just wondered if you could update, because at the moment it still lists under GLA leads David Galley, who is now lately not of this parish. So I wondered if someone has replaced him?
Yes, so the terms of reference for the steering committee are by role rather than by name. Perhaps previously we sent you names, but yes, it's the chief finance officer, which that role is currently occupied by Enver.
Right. Okay. So so it would be the executive director, Good Growth, the chief finance officer, the assistant director, Environment and Energy, the assistant director, Group Treasury, Head of Climate Change, and the Head of Impact Investment and Analysis, who now has his own nameplate, I'm pleased to say. That's the GLA representatives.
That's correct, and then it's chaired by the Chief of Staff.
Chaired by the Chief of Staff, with the Deputy Chief of Staff, and then also, obviously, the Deputy Mayor for Energy and Environment, and
That's
also Natan, who's is on policy and delivery. Okay, so I mean, obviously that's got a sort of balance between the people on the sort of more financial side, and then on the more on the environment and energy side. Shirley, you set out briefly the sort of 3 areas for capital expenditure. Is there more of a hierarchy or more of a methodology within that says, oh, actually, this project is going to be better than another project? Or would you say that energy efficiency takes precedence over transport, or transport takes precedence over renewables? Or you're looking at each project on its own merits? What sort of methodology are you using?
I think that it's on its own merits. You know, there were 3 things to look at: carbon, the cost of carbon, the additionality, and whatever the other one was. But yeah, so meeting those criteria, and I think that's the job of the LTL advisors and the credit committee then to take the right balance. I think so. There's no preference over one over the other.
So, and this is probably more to Enver. Are you confident that you've got the right balance on the Green Finance Committee between the environment expertise and the financial expertise when choosing which project should be given funding, bearing in mind we're not going to look in the box until tomorrow?
I'd say I'd go for quality over quantity, and just hope that the environment people that we have got the teams behind them, so that even though if you've got 1 or 2 people there, they've done the necessary assessment and work before they come into that committee. So it's not about the number of people at the committee, but it's more about the work that they've done before it comes to that committee. I don't chair that particular committee. I chair the credit committee, and I've got external experts there that ask the right questions as well. But yes, I'm confident that my environmental colleagues will test what comes before that committee before it does.
So it sounds, Catherine, as if there's a job of work for you and some of the staff who've been appointed to do that scrutinising of the environmental credentials of the different projects to ensure that they're going to deliver the benefits that we've just been discussing. Are you feeling confident that you've got the team in place now? Because I know we would spend some time trying to get people recruited. Got the right people there?
That's right. So this time, nearly a year ago, when we came to you in autumn, I think you were asking why nothing was happening, and are things going fast enough and so forth. At that point, we didn't have a team at all. We have recruited for every position. At one point, we hit the glorious heights of all 9 roles being filled. 1 colleague has now moved on, so we're recruiting for that role. But 8 out of 9 is pretty good, and that is both for colleagues on the London Treasury side, financial experts and carbon analysts, and then 4 on my side in the environment team. So we're well established now.
I think I just wanted to add, it is a difficult one to keep to get the team staffed up and financed, because everybody's looking at this. So it's a highly competitive field, and private sector and public sector salaries are obviously not the same. But I think people who come here are very motivated to really work in this area, so that's brilliant. And I think, if you wanted any testament to the sort of Rottweilerness of the team and their expertise. I know the team, when we were advocating for the public sector decarbonisation scheme, the fire brigade had put in a number of applications, were turned down, and our team went to bat for them and got them to change their minds and secured funding for them, which really shows their technical expertise, but also their advocacy skills, I think. So hugely important, I think, to have that. And again, thanks to them for all the work that they're doing.
Well, that's good to hear. Obviously, there can be external factors that can cause delays, and that can then lead to loss of confidence. It can also increase expense. So, for example, COVID has caused the Thames Tideway Tunnel, a huge infrastructure project, to be slightly delayed, and also probably has costed a bit more. HS2 appears to be no longer high speed in its original conception. It appears to be joining Old Oak Common to Birmingham, which I don't think was what it was originally planned. But I mean, that is partly there are assessments being made on the massive increase in cost applied to that project. Do you think that we are in any danger at all, because you were talking only about capital expenditure projects, probably infrastructure projects, that there could be delays that could increase the costs and threaten the viability of some of the schemes that we might want to see coming through for this kind of funding?
I mean, again, I'll ask Catherine and Enver and Kenra to come in, but, I think when people are looking at the feasibility of projects, you look at everything and you try and foresee what there might be, but there are always unforeseens, like COVID, like RAC, like Grenfell, combustibles and so on. So those things you can't foresee, but I think obviously we try to do our best, and then I think we have to mitigate those if those eventualities incur. There are known, I guess, things that you can try and project or predict, like inflation. We know sort of roughly how unstable the economic conditions are. Enver talked about market uncertainty because of policy prevarications and dithering, which isn't helpful, which then causes the cost of investments to go up, or in fact loss of confidence to invest at all. Those things are out of our control, really, and all we can try to do is then either help mitigate or try and find alternative sources of finance to help plug the gaps. But it is a problem, and we really just do need a sort of period of stability and long-term signals, really, so that the market can invest confidently.
Well, yes, I do agree. I mean, there's an argument that says that HS2 has partly suffered from the blight that it's suffering from because of government dithering and delay, as you say. But Enver, do you think this is a problem that we've taken sufficient care to navigate our way past in terms of delay, increasing costs?
As Shirley said, it's about assessing what the threats are when you're making that investment choice. And if one of the criteria is that this is the schemes we want to do, ignoring the ones that have already happened, but the ones that future ones are shovel ready within 3 years, that sort of reduces the horizon of the risk in terms of none of us have got a crystal ball, but can we accurately foresee all of the risks that might occur in that technology in the coming 3 years. And I'd hate to say here that we've got it all covered. That's why we have steering groups and credit committees to sort of challenge that, and other external experts as well, and people that are experts in the finance world in this market, and why we created a green finance team of people whose job it is to just look at this day in, day out. Some of the risks, as I was talking to some of our colleagues from overseas, is sometimes the technology doesn't come on board as quickly as the project may assume it does, or there's a knock-on effect. So, you can replace all the trucks in the city and say, right, all the trucks that come in have got to be electric from this date onwards, but then you need the vehicle infrastructure to be able to charge them up, whereas it's renowned, for example, that cars can be charged up overnight. Trucks have a requirement to charge up during the day, so can the national grid take that? So you start getting into and this and that and then the other, and have we got all the bases covered? And I'd say probably not.
I mean, absolutely, and sometimes people start talking about technologies that simply don't exist at the moment. I believe the Prime Minister has been talking about carbon capture and storage, which a lot of people have talked about for a long time, but doesn't really exist as an actual thing, really, particularly yet. I just wondered if I could come back to you a bit more, Shirley. We've explored the fact that you want to focus on using the proceeds of the Green Finance Fund on renewable energy, energy efficiency and clean transportation. What was the logic that led to the choice of those three specific areas?
The biggest source of emissions in London for our buildings and transportation system, essentially.
Okay. And is there any chance that it could be used on anything to do with agriculture? Because obviously that's a huge source of emissions, or is that not something we're looking at?
Not yet. I think, we talked about adaptation earlier, but I think similarly, any of those sorts of areas that are out with, the current terms of reference, I think we could only move on when, I think we've got more than enough demand for finance from those areas before we get onto the others. But that's, as I said, we are keen to look at other thematic areas like adaptation, nature-based solutions and so on.
And I think we've agreed that at this stage we can't possibly say how the other 315 million might be split between those three areas. Okay, thank you very much, Chair. I'm finished.
Thank you. Assemblymember Russell.
Thank you, Chair. So, yes, I have a question for Catherine. So, say the market conditions for the issue of a green bond were kind of in a good place. That would mean that the GLA was committed to paying out interest, which provides a risk to the GLA. So I'm wondering what the internal oversight arrangements for the are for the sale of green bonds, and also whether Assembly members or this committee or Budget and Performance Committee, how the Assembly would be kind of involved, consulted, informed in terms of what those governance arrangements are. Is that for Kenroy?
Yes, I'll take that one up. Well, not least the actual management of some of those interest rate risk that you sort of alluded to, rest of my team, and and I think this was discussed at the Budget and Performance Committee last week, and the key bit for us is a matching exercise in effect, really. So if we're borrowing at one rate from the bond market, we need to actually lend as close as possible, if not identically, at the same rate, and therefore minimizing the interest rate risk to the GLA. So that's really what we need to actually make sure that we manage properly. But notwithstanding that, I mean, because there's always potentially a timing issue, there's 75 million available to cover some of that risk. You touched on the governance, and there's sort of two layers internally within GLA. Firstly, you have the credit committee, which actually looks at and agrees what sort of interest rates we will actually provide to projects. And and part of the work that we need to be doing is also to show how we're doing that matching exercise. But also you have the Green Finance Steering Committee that we also report to on the general performance as to how the program is actually performing. But and again, like was sort of discussed last week at the Budget and Performance, that's also an avenue for the committee, the Assembly, to scrutinise how that's performing.
Okay, so those meetings of the Credit Committee and the Green Finance Steering Committee, are those minutes public? Are the meetings held in public, or are they behind closed doors but the minutes get published?
They are behind closed doors, and the reason for that is that there are commercial sensitivities, of course, as people come to us and ask for financing. But as we've said, we will publish at the end of each year a list of the projects that we financed, the likely impacts, the net proceeds that we've received from green finance, any payments back, what we've allocated outwards, and how much there is left to allocate. So we will be transparent, but we'll do that not on a project by project or sort of month by month basis. We'll do that at the end of the year.
So when you say the end of the year, is that the end of the sort of calendar year or the end of the financial year? So are we expecting that in kind of April or
so
December?
The Chief Investment Officer made a commitment last week at the Budget and Performance Committee that we would do it at the end of the financial year. So I think that's been our offer.
Okay.
But one more thing, just to say that I think there is a part of the part of your question that hasn't been answered, Assembly Member, which is when can the committee have a bit of a say?
Yeah.
So I think that, I suppose I'll personally commit that at the point where we think the green bond market is picking up, that I'll get the relevant committee clerks to add it onto the next available agenda of either the Budget Performance Committee or this committee, so that we can come back and involve you, if that suits.
I think that would be very much appreciated, and presumably it'll just depend in terms of timing on whether there's a budget or oversight meeting coming up next. But I think presumably the Assembly would like to know about this as soon as possible. So
I doubt it'll be like an instant thing anyway. So if once the market starts to pick up, we think, look, it's starting to get better. It might be something that's now going to be coming up, rather than we just think, well, let's do it next week. Okay. It won't happen that quick.
Okay, very good. So my next question is about the Green Finance Fund, and wondering how you're going to measure the impact of that fund. Is that for Catherine or for Kenroy.
Yes, I think we've sort of touched on this before, but maybe just to say something about the indicators, because this was something we've had tested a few times. We do have comparisons that we can draw with the Mayor's Energy Efficiency Fund, which is still running this year, comes to a conclusion next year, and that also financed projects both in energy efficiency and in renewable energy, and that had forecast impact targets. And so with the hundreds of millions of pounds that it secured for investment, it had CO2 outcomes that were expected, megawatts of renewable energy installations, etc. And so we can compare ourselves against that, and I hope we would be doing as well as that. And those outcomes are published by Amber Investments, who run the Mayor's Energy Efficiency Fund for the GLA. And we could share some of those after this meeting, if that would be helpful.
I think that would certainly be helpful. And does that break it down into individual projects, or is there some other method for kind of tracking what's happening with the individual projects?
So obviously when business cases come to the credit committee, we will be aware of the projected carbon savings or the projected generation capacity that they're suggesting, and we will track that over time. But I wouldn't expect a uniform carbon saving per pound. If a project is more innovative, or it's a first of a kind, then that may be more expensive, but it's still worth doing because it can lead the market. In other cases, people will be doing energy efficiency projects that have that are fairly well established and have a decent payback, but they're quick to get moving. And I think we would expect to see a balance within the portfolio of those different types of project.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Would you not be taking probably these items to the quarterly, putting it in the quarterly performance report?
We can consider that, Assembly Member. I think we've started doing that with climate budgeting, and we do like a summary level. Yeah. It's about how much of that performance report goes into detail, because it's a very specific part of our agenda. And when you look at the performance packs, the level of detail we go into is usually one indicator per area, so it would need to go through sort of a ratification. I mean, we can gather the information as whether it should form part of that public report. It's something we could, instead of public, share with the committee instead. So I can't guarantee at the moment that I could put all of that detail into a quarterly pack, which is meant to be for the whole corporate organisation.
I think that we just need to balance the sort of time collating the information and then reporting it and doing all the verification. So quarterly sounds a little bit too much, but why don't we take that away and see what we can do?
We can see what's practical.
Yeah, I think perhaps not an in-depth report, but if it was a headline almost.
A headline KPI type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be reasonable to do that, and we can keep the details scheme by scheme stuff non-public, but we can always share.
Yeah, well, if you give a headline, then perhaps it should show if there's something interesting happening that people might want to ask more about, or if it's ticking along.
Which is sort of what you've been doing.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's sort of what you've been doing anyway.
Yes, I mean, in the previous financial year's KPIs, that wasn't part of what the Environment and Energy team or Green New Deal mission was reporting against. But actually, in our overall commentary about progress that we'd made as a mission, we did start writing about the Green Bond or then the Green Finance Fund. And I think in the last quarterly edition that we presented to the Assembly, we mentioned the two investments that were being made in the TfL and LLDC. So although it wasn't an official KPI, we knew that the Assembly would be interested, so we included that in our write-up.
Thanks. Shirley, you're still here. Are you having a lot of fun, or do you want to take this opportunity to go over to...
I think, no, I just want to finish and say, as I said, thank you before, but, this is such an important issue for us, and not just for London, but for all the UK cities and internationally, about how do we mobilise more finance into this area. There is a lot more money going into, renewable energy and so on, not enough into energy efficiency, and I think that's partly a function of how difficult it is to get a return. So really, I think just starting this work gets investors interested. We're having these conversations at our level, city level, 3CI and elsewhere internationally as well. It really is galvanising people. So, but we obviously need to accelerate this.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us anyway. Assembly Member Bakari.
Thank you. I'm going to be talking about the second party opinion review. Catherine, this is for you. Could you tell us about the outcome of that review of the draft London Green Financing Framework?
With apologies, I feel like I keep passing things to Kenroy, but he's actually the person who commissioned this review, so he knows his stuff.
Yes, I mean, we're literally, that review is actually ongoing at the moment. So we hope it to be concluded fairly soon. It might result in some amendments, enhancement, I should say, rather, to the draft framework. And once that's finalised, we will actually publish the finalised version. So it will go to the credit committee if there's any amendments. The committee will actually look and sign that off. But as soon as it's finalised, it will be made public.
And what were those enhancements and changes that you're going to be doing?
Well, it's based on some of the discussion we've been having with the reviewer that's looking at it at the moment. I think there were some areas around do we want to set out there were two bits. One was, do we want to actually have an independent verification of the impact and how the financials are actually managed? So again, I think that was a given, but they said it's not written down in the report. So we'll need to take that and to the credit committee and say, here's potentially how to enhance it. Could we look at that? So it's more around mechanical stuff like that, as opposed to the broader policy of these are the three main areas. It's really more what I consider sort of operational, mechanical aspects of the framework.
And the deadline for the final publication?
Well, we're certainly trying to get that out as soon as possible. So I think my team is sort of working quite closely on this, and we're trying to really wrap this up in we're talking about weeks rather than months.
Right. Okay. And so so you will be publishing the second party opinion. That is the intended thing. Okay. Enver, I'd like to talk a little bit about the credit committee. That you said you chair the credit committee, and I'd like to know a little bit more about the external representatives, if I may. What is their background, if we can?
We had an interim person while we were recruiting. I think we've only just recently recruited, so I am going to pass this over to Kenroy. Okay. I haven't seen the applications, so I believe they are being assessed. Yeah.
Well, yes, the interim person. I mean, he had a sort of a wealth of experience around finance, investment finance, and banking. Coupled with investing in and sustainability assets, as well as policy work. So very well qualified for that role. As Enver said, I mean, we've went out to then recruit sort of permanent members, and we have sort of selected or identified three, sort of even equally qualified members with a mix of public finance, private finance, investment policy, and sustainable experience. And we hope, subject to the usual reference and checks, to announce those three members shortly.
And have you got clear understanding of their roles and what contributions you're expecting from them? And has that already actually started?
Yes, I mean, it is very much to provide independent, objective critique, guidance of when coming to consider the applications that are coming forward to the committee.
I'd like to talk about how many times they've met. Have you got a number? The credit committee.
We've only met twice.
They met? Sorry?
We've only met twice so far.
Twice,
yeah.
Okay. And you've had to make some decisions. So let's just on scrutinising what I want to kind of cotton down is that in the budget meeting on the 21st of September, it was announced that £180 million of the £500 million of Green Finance Fund had already been committed, and yet we've only got a chance to scrutinise this recently today. So you've only met twice. What decisions have you made, and how can we make sure that we're in the loop in a more
I'm not sure you can be involved in the loop because that's what's been delegated to us. So what we do is as we said before, we'll put an annual report as to what those decisions are, so we can give you what's already been decided, so you can ask questions about what's been decided, but it's not.
Right, okay. Now, you mentioned something about adding to the agenda to...
that was about if the green bond...
That's
if we
different to this.
Vehicle,
so can you perhaps add to your agenda for the credit committee a better way of relating back the information to us in a more timely manner? Is that something that we could do?
There hasn't really been a time lag between seeing you and when those decisions, because the committee's met twice in the last sort of 6 weeks, and this is the first invite I've had on it. So we're being very transparent in giving. There was only 3 decisions so far, and we've said we've got a pipeline hopefully coming in tomorrow. So there isn't even a time lag in reality of letting you know what those are, how much we've spent, and there will be an annual report that covers, as the Chief Investment Officer has promised, will come out with all
any projects that have been approved that you can note?
I've told you the 3 that we've done, and the rest will be dependent on what applications we get tomorrow, and those will take a while before they come in front of the committee, because they've got to go through, as we've just been discussing for the last hour, about the sort of assessment as to which ones should come forward and the criteria, and further work with those who've applied. So and then they've got to go through to the steering committee, and then only those that make it will get as far as the credit committee.
Can you tell me a little bit about the responsibilities of the Green Finance Steering Committee and the Green Finance Fund Credit Committee and how they work together? Just some kind of clarity on that.
Pass that one to Catherine.
Yes, of course. So we circulated terms of reference for both of those committees in the pack that we sent to the committee to your committee beforehand. The Green Finance Steering Committee is really setting the strategic direction for us. That's why it has the representatives of the Mayor's Office. So they've set us the mission and objectives that we are to deliver. It also acts as a project board and oversees the implementation of the whole programme. So if we were not on track, if by this time we hadn't invested any money or come to them with the wrong sorts of projects, we'd be hearing all about it. The role of the steering committee is also to make those strategic connections with other things that the Mayor is trying to achieve, so the other corporate priorities and policies. They look at our project plan, where we say this is what we're expecting to do in the next quarter, these are the staff that we need, etc. And if we recommend any changes to that plan, we discuss that with them. We take them the expressions of interest, so they don't look in detail at business cases, that's not their expertise, but they do check that it fits with the strategic objectives of the Mayor's London Environment Strategy, of the Green Finance Fund, etc. And then if they say yes to that, then we pass that on to the Credit Committee to look at the detailed financial analysis and carbon and environmental analysis. And we also take them our risks and any issues that are arising and resolve those where we can. The Credit Committee is smaller and more technical. It receives the project proposals in detail and scrutinises them. It also is responsible for the framework that Conroy has described, and once we get the second party opinion in, if there are any proposed changes to the framework, it's the Credit Committee that will approve those. It satisfies itself that the assessment of projects has been carried out properly. So we say, we quiz London Treasury colleagues on, have you run the maths properly? And they explain why they have, and we challenge that. and eventually it decides on the investment recommendations. So that's more technical, and the steering committee, as you would expect, is more strategic.
Great, thank you for that. I needed that. Yeah, that was good. Well done.
Thank you. You're dwindling over here, but quality, not quantity.
Absolutely.
Assembly Member Baker.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions on risk management. And the first one is, this is directed to Catherine or Enver, how would you want to split it up? What are the main considerations and when balancing the environmental goals with the recovery of the loan? Don't all rush.
It's between us, really, but go ahead, Enver.
It's a really good question. There are criteria, so, Catherine was mentioning earlier around it's got to have no more than X amount of pound cost towards tonnage of carbon reduction. There's got to be sort of payback period that fits within certain criteria. It doesn't really get in front of me until it's at least met the minimum. It's always a tough one because it's a decision that I have to grapple with, not just with individual projects but across the whole spectrum of what the GLA group does. And it's safety more important than housing, and is housing more important than net zero? And then when they all overlap with one another, and well, actually this one ticks more boxes than climate, it ticks more overall agenda items. So when we look at that, we're looking at how many sort of overall targets is this going to help towards, and then there's the whole payback risk, so we have to balance that. I think if there's a payback risk, that probably takes priority over anything else, so we have to minimise that risk, and that risk is minimised by who we lend to, and we have a certain criteria, and as Chief Investment Officer described to the Budget Performance Committee, it's usually almost the lowest possible credit risk organisations, ones that have got a similar credit rating to the GLA that we would lend to, but using our powers and economies of scale that we get that sort of discount that we pass on to them. But usually there's a minimal risk in terms of payback. That's got to be the highest priority. And then you weigh up, well, what's the best payback in terms of air quality reductions, and how many boxes does that tick? So when it comes to committee, we've got all of those factors to consider. We've got the hopefully free people that will be available as well, external to the organisation, that will help give us that much more objective view around some of those non-financial aspects as well. So I would say, and you would expect me to say that, I'd say the finance stuff prevails over anything else first.
Yeah. So, sorry, Catherine. I'll come back. I'll ask follow up in a second.
And I think I'd give the mirror image of that, which is that a project that didn't have decent financials wouldn't make it to the credit committee. So it might have fantastic carbon savings, and I might really like it, but if Enver and colleagues don't say that it stacks up, we wouldn't even look at it. Of course, then once the financials are good enough, then I'll be pressing for the projects that have the highest carbon savings. One of the questions I think that is implicit in much of this discussion is, how do we prioritise if we are oversubscribed? We have not yet been in that fortunate position. Maybe we will be after tomorrow. I'll be delighted if we are. But that's something that the steering committee has guided us on. They could have said to us, we want to go for the most innovative projects that have never been done anywhere before, or they could have said we want a balance across all of the boroughs, or we want a balance across the three different pillars of the programme. And actually what they've said is, if you are oversubscribed, go for the projects that have the fastest delivery and the largest expected carbon reduction. So basically accelerate the net zero delivery as quickly as you can. So that's something they've said to us, and we will operate accordingly.
Thank you. So just going back to the sort of risk of it, Enver, what you're basically saying is there's a certain level, and in terms of recovery of the loan, if they don't get across that, then they're not really going to get into consideration as well. Now, I'm by no means a finance specialist, as I'm sure you're aware, so please do advise me if I'm making any incorrect assumptions, but in terms of interest rates where they are at the moment, that has got to surely have an impact either on the predictions of being able to get the money back, or the affordability of people putting in bids overall. So how is that affecting your judgment of payback of the loans, or is it simply that the ones that won't pay back won't come in front of you?
Well, let's assume that we think they can pay it back because they're safe. The interest rate is obviously a decision that has put some parts of the GLA group and other organisations off borrowing because they're saying now's not a good time. If you're borrowing, if you think that in the short to medium term interest rates are going to come down, which fingers crossed we're all hoping they will, then it might put off an organisation borrowing for 20 years at a fixed rate that we would give now, because in 3 or 4 years they'd look at it and think, why on earth did I borrow money at that rate? So we'd have to offer flexibility going forward, and I think Kenroy described it better than I, that what you do is you offset and you try and match your lending and your borrowing at the same time. So we've got a whole team of people whose job it is to play the money markets every day, and that's what they do. That's why we have these experts that spend their time doing that and then just tell me how much money we've got available. Yeah. We have the flexibility to reconsider that loan arrangement later on, but at this stage, if we say we will lend you, we're lending it at a particular rate, and then we use the 75 million pot that Catherine was referring to, which is 75 of the 90 that you'll all know about, which is there to subsidise certain rates. So what we'll do is, if we said this is 6%, we'll let you have it 5%, so we'll take the hit on the 1% and we'll pay that 1% over the duration of the loan from that 75 million. We haven't had to do that much, but that's what it's there for, to help offset that and to mitigate that risk for us. So we're taking it out of one pocket, funding it from another, and it offsets it.
Okay, thank you. Catherine.
Just to try to inject a small note of optimism, it obviously has been a really difficult year economically. One thing that we've also seen, as well as the high interest rates making it harder to make those business cases, is as a result of the conditions we've experienced with high energy prices, which none of us would have wished for, nonetheless, energy efficiency projects are now more attractive because they are they're saving higher costs, and we've definitely seen that within the GLA group, a sort of heightened concentration on energy bills and then how they could be reduced, and I think that's true across the public sector. So wouldn't have wanted that, but it is focusing minds.
That's interesting. And just to come back to Enver, I want to finish on this. At the start of your previous answer, you sort of saying effectively, and correct me if I'm wrong, we will lend to safe organisations. We'll lend to safe. These are the people we lend to, and we won't. Has the recent sort of instability around markets, stuff like that, has that affected your consideration of who is safe, who is a safe organisation, who is a safe institution or not, or is that the same?
It's the same, because it's mostly local authorities, so they're in one category, and then you've got the next category, which is like NHS trusts, social housing, and we have an external expert company that assesses that first. We haven't had any yet, but there might be some tomorrow, I hope. So we've put sort of the belt and braces around it to make sure that we've got the right opinions before we take things forward. So you can imagine we're cautious when we need to be, but local authorities are safe, and even if they're under a 114, their credit rating somehow doesn't get affected because of the backing from government and stuff. So.
Because basically, one way or another, it's all, the money's got to keep going around there. Thanks very much for that. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Enver, Kenroy, I just wondered what you would say or respond to the kind of accusation that there's been in the media around green bonds being a fad, and I think the Japan Government Pension Investment Fund's Chief Investment Officer stated that green bonds are more costly, complicated and cumbersome than other bonds because they may attract a similar, same or similar interest rate, but have less liquidity. What would be your response to those accusations or suggestions?
I mean, certainly, given the added need to demonstrate where you're investing that money once you've borrowed it on the green bond, there are going to be more, shall we say, bureaucracy compared to a normal or ordinary bond, so I think that's probably the first thing to say. So I think that's probably a given, because as implied by the question, people are going to want to know: are you really investing in a sustainable or energy or green investment? Because that's what you've actually set out that you're intending to do. But I think with more and more, with really comprehensive impact reporting, that should actually allay any concerns that people have about this. I mean, for us, it would be hard for anyone to say that what we're doing is not supporting environmental, activity. But what we're looking to do is also, as I touched on previously, is to also get someone to actually verify, look at the impacts that we've done to say, yes, this is indeed environmental activity that's undertaken green. We're investing in green infrastructure.
Yeah, I think that what people would be concerned about would obviously be that is their money safe as taxpayers, and is it being spent well, and are they getting the best outcome environmentally and to the public purse? So I suppose what would be your reassurances around that this isn't just a fad and it is the best way to utilise?
Well, the thing is, I mean, this is, after all, from our perspective, public funding, and we don't treat it differently. It might be labelled as green finance, green bond, but the same, relevant checks and indeed scrutiny that goes around investive public funding is also applies here. We've gone to the bond market, the green bond market, because you have one of the rationale is because a lot of institutional investors have responsible investment strategy and want to actually invest in those areas. Had we not gone to the green bond market, we probably would have gone to PWLB. They don't label theirs it's not labeled as green fund, but it's still a source of finance that will actually help us to facilitate invest in those environmental infrastructure. But the same principles and checks and balances that go into invest in other public monies also apply here.
Thanks, Kenroy. Assembly Member Prince.
Thank you, Chair. Well, to coin a phrase, who would have thought? Earlier, Assemblymember Cooper stumbled into the risk management and has actually asked my questions already. But probably much better way of asking than I could. So I've got an issue with that. But there is one question that I would like to ask. If I can find it. Where we go? Yeah. So, do we know if the investment, I know we've only done 3 so far, but do we know if this is creating green jobs, the investment fund?
What a good question.
I thought so.
We don't specifically ask about job creation in the application process, I believe, Kenroy, correct me if I'm wrong. We ask about kind of wider environmental, social impacts. The projects that we're talking about are within the GLA group, and I don't believe that the people have come to us saying we need to therefore expand our staffing to do this. I think what is happening is that staff who are employed by the GLA group are being given the green light, no pun intended, to go ahead with projects that will make a difference for carbon savings, energy savings, etc. And if it weren't for that financing that we're making available, for example in TfL, perhaps they'd be doing other maintenance and renewals projects, but because this money is available affordably, it's allowing them to do projects that might otherwise have been delayed.
So can I just say, perhaps would it be worth monitoring if there are any jobs created? I mean, it's a good thing if there are, isn't it, surely?
Yes, I mean, whilst, as Catherine indicated, the core indicators are, sort of environmental, but we've given projects within the application the ability to include any wider impacts that might be, sort of derived from the projects. And, I can't tell off the top of my head if jobs created was any has been included, but certainly we would actually, encourage and ask them to report on wider impacts, potentially jobs as well.
Thanks, Assemblymember Prince. And I'd say members ask the questions, they can't control how guests answer. That was certainly the case when Assemblymember Fortune asked the questions. I'd have to go back and see on Assemblymember Cooper, of VAR that one later, and see if you strayed or not. But Assemblymember Fortune, over to you.
Thank you. I actually asked for clarification on your question, which was how many applications have we had? And we said, and the answer was, we'll know tomorrow. Yes.
Well, no. You're the chair. You have to.
And then I said, will we know? And then we were told that so I didn't go anywhere near Assemblymember Cooper's question. Well, I'm going to put a crisp 5 on it. So my questions were about risk, which actually, when Ellie asked her excellent question earlier, she got some of the answers for the questions I was going to ask, which was about, no, it's absolutely, that's what happens with questioning when you're an effective questioner, which was how you're managing risk in terms of those projects which aren't making a cash saving. I think you covered that by saying that you wouldn't invest in them, they wouldn't get to the table. And then how do you manage the environmental benefits that come out of it, which you talked about that as well. So they were covered from me. So a couple of free-range questions then, in terms of managing risk and lessons learned. So there are 2 bonds that we've issued previously, one around Crossrail and one around the Northern Line extension, was it, I think? What did we learn from those exercises? Thank God you're here, Kenroy.
Yeah. Well, I think
they all look straight at you.
Quite. I mean, I think that probably the first thing to say here, I mean, the approach that we're taking now is different. I mean, where those were a single specific activities, project, if you like, that was actually so it's a bond for a specific. What we're doing here, it's potentially several, projects that will be, if we do actually issue a bond, will be, will be covered. So it's covered within the three areas, the 3 categories that we're doing. So that's probably the first thing to say, and it's not entirely like for like, but certainly one of the things, and probably going back to a previous question, it's around trying to keep it as flexible as possible. You don't want to create terms and conditions within that framework that make it quite difficult for you to actually, deliver once you've actually got the funding, and this is one of the things, not just looking at the ones that we've actually done, but also other cities as well. Equally, I think one of the bonds that we've also done was a sort of a variable one linked to sort of performance, and again, there, sort of what we didn't want to do is to be tied into here's a specific indicator that you must attain, because we don't have a control over all the projects, or as much as we'd like. It makes it difficult to actually hit that, and you could be penalised financially if you don't hit that.
just to unpack that, then the answer is that the previous issuances, they were for specific causes, they were specific financial vehicles to deliver something.
Yeah.
So you get a result there. This is different. This is more of a fund you can dip into.
Indeed.
So in terms of the lessons we learn from that, it's going to be in terms of, I guess, process and setting it up.
Yes, and I mean, to some extent, I mean, the process of going out there and get, you know, it's what you do a framework, you talk to the banks and lawyers to actually get it up and running. Yeah.
So in the market, and I may be off target a little bit here. I had a quick shoot through Tinternet beforehand to see if I could find it. But there's something in the back of my head is telling me that was it the Glasgow Alliance, Mark Carney's vehicle that was set up to do something similar, to have an investment fund specifically for green projects, that run into trouble. Like I say, if I'm wide of the mark here, that's fine. But are there any sort of indications from commercial projects, or any risks or concerns that are being raised by commercial projects that could influence us? That's what it was called.
I haven't kept abreast of that. I mean, but certainly one of the things that we have, you know, sort of, I mean, been looking at. I mean, because the Mayor of London Energy Efficiency Fund, MEEF, which is externally managed, so that's quite similar to what we've been doing, and it's, you know, we've drawn you know, quite a lot of lessons from that. I mean, you know, sort of not least, I think those were more what I call operational issues, more than probably along the lines of risk. You know, sort of keeping, you know, sort of, I mean, the process simple. You know, some of the people who we're lending to here, the entity that we're lending to here, can get funding from PwC quite easily. So it's how do we make it quite simple for them. I think one of the key difference here is and going back to linking it back to risk, is who we're actually lending to. We're very, very cautious about that, and you know, sort of GLA Group, local authorities predominantly, to manage that sort of credit risk. And I talked about how we're then managing the interest rate risk around matching.
So really, it's the application bar is a touch higher. Okay. So we come back to the applications again. Catherine, you've got an exciting day tomorrow. It's going to be like Christmas, unwrapping the box.
Last week.
I bet you're glad you wish you hadn't said that now. And you tip all the applications out. Can we get a list? And I know we can't get the details because of commercial reasons, but can we get a list of who's applied? It'd be interesting to see if it's just ourselves applying or if we are reaching out to partners, because that would be an element of risk if people aren't picking up on the opportunity.
Sure. I think we've got a responsibility to our steering committee to update the Mayor's office first, and colleagues there, about the what we find inside the box. But I'd be happy after that to update the committee on the sorts of applicants that we've had, whether that is from GLA Group only or whether it's gone out to boroughs as well. I should say that we've agreed with the steering committee that if we get applications from boroughs, we will anonymise them so that we tell them it's this sort of project, it's renewable energy, and it's going to have this many megawatts per pound, but we're not going to say it's from the borough of such and such, and that's just to avoid any risk of political you know, compromise, and we want to protect them, and so in the same way I think it wouldn't be appropriate for us to come to you and say we've heard from borough X, Y or Z, but we can say, I think, if we've heard from, you know, what different categories of applicants we've had.
Yeah, so it's partners, not just the GLA family as well. And rather than wait for the next meeting, have you got any idea when that might be, timeframes?
When is our next steering committee? It's in October, I think. Yes. Perhaps I'll commit by the end of October to update, if that's all right.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Update us on the list of categories by the end of October.
So at that point, with the permission of the chair of our steering committee, I'll come back and say, did we get applications? Did we get them from more than just the GLA group? In a way, the easier part for us to lean on is the GLA group, because the mayor has made his net zero 2030 target very clear, and through the climate budgeting process that Enver described in such detail at the Budget and Performance Committee last week, we've really forced all of the functional bodies to think about their pathway to 2030 and to say what they can afford out of their own budget and where they can't afford it. And then those unfunded projects, we have really pressed them to come to us in the Green Finance Fund to borrow from us in order to accelerate their progress. We don't have quite that same clout with the boroughs or financial education, further education institutions, NHS, etc. So we're waiting to see whether our powers of persuasion and the offer that we're making with this product are good enough. So that, for me, is the real test.
I get that, but my only question was, are you only going to tell us the categories at the end of October? I don't see... I mean, we're discussing this today, we're scrutinising it, it's an item on our agenda. You can send it confidentially to us. I don't see any reason why you'd hold that information from members if you know it tomorrow. We don't mind being the second, third, fourth email that knows that information, but I don't see why we'd have to wait till the end of October to know that.
I think what Catherine was saying was that it needs to go to the Green Steering Group, and they're not meeting till mid-October, so it can't be before they get it.
So we can't know the categories of who's
Not categories,
applied?
it wasn't categories. The question from Assembly Fortune
and that's
was
why I clarified, and I asked,
so
I asked Catherine, so what are you when are you telling us so we can have the categories?
I'm really not trying to be slippery here, but it's possible that some of the applications that come in actually won't be eligible. And so then if I come to you and I say it's fantastic, I've got 11 applications, and then later on, by the middle of October, when I go to David Bellamy and the others and say actually half of them weren't legit, or they'd misunderstood our process, then I might be overexciting you if I shared those numbers straight away. So just being cautious, we'd like to do that first filter and then come back to you.
And 11 would be a good number.
So I would, let's see what we get.
Okay.
We will see. I genuinely don't know. We've talked to a lot of boroughs.
I don't find 11 very exciting, so don't worry, we won't get very excited. But it seems like 11 seems like a high mark at this point, is it?
We'll see what we get from the boroughs.
Okay.
Genuinely, I know that the one or two have said they'll definitely put in applications, and a lot of others have said they're bubbling up, they're brewing applications, but whether they come to us in the first round or the second, I don't know.
Okay. I've just got an image of council leaders across London with cauldrons. Assembly Member Boff.
When does the public find out what these allocations are?
So we've said we'll publish an annual report, and our Chief Investment Officer has said that will be at the end of the financial year. But we've been pretty transparent. I mean, we launched
this is not a trick question. I'm just
end of June, and straight away put that in the public domain. We've told you today about the ULEZ investment that was within a very short period after the decision was taken.
So we'll know all the details available to the steering group. We will know by the end of the financial year.
Yes, so I would expect that the Mayor will really want to talk about these investments, so I'd be surprised if they don't go into the public domain sooner.
I would say that the annual report is the one place where it's all come together in one place, but you'll be hearing about the individual investments much sooner than that, as and when they come through and they've gone through the necessary assessment and criteria. If we can take them all, for example, in one particular steering group and one credit committee, we can tell you soon after that, but I don't know how many there's going to be, and if there's only one or two, then it won't be that long afterwards. But if we've got many of them, then we won't be able to review them all in one go, and we'll have to work out how we're going to prioritise them. But we will let you know as we go through and those decisions are being made.
And we'll be able to see the number of applicants, not the names of the applicants necessarily, because I suppose some of the applicants would want to remain confidential if they're not successful, but we'll see the number of applicants, how many were invalid, how many failed to persuade Kenroy, and then how many were successful.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
We will see that in a tabular form with the data.
We can make that available.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think it looks like everybody is done, so that just leaves to say thank you. to Catherine, Enver and Ken Roy. And next time, I promise you'll have a nameplate all the way through. But thank you.
Thank you. Just reflecting on a few of the questions we've been asked and thinking perhaps we've replied quite literally, but sometimes it's helpful to bear in mind the spirit of what we're being asked. We were asked, I think Assembly Member Bahari asked us about how you could influence or have sight of what the Credit Committee decisions are and say whether you approve or not, really. And I think the place to look is at the mission, the aims, the objectives of the Green Finance Programme. Take a look at those, and if you think that those are wrong, let us know. We'll discuss it with our steering committee. And similarly, the draft Green Finance Framework, for which we're getting a second party opinion, but it isn't yet final. Again, if you have any comments on that, we would be happy to have them. I wanted to correct something that I said to Assembly Member Fortune about if a project goes wrong for any reason, whose responsibility it is to then withdraw it from the programme. It's actually the Credit Committee. I've gone back and checked the terms of reference, so I think I said steering committee, so just to correct that for the minutes. And then finally, what we haven't talked about today is future funds. We've talked a lot about the debt financing, which would be us borrowing and then on lending through the Green Finance Fund. We're starting to think about how we could do co-investment, taking or attracting in private investors alongside GLA finance in the same way that the Mayor's Energy Efficiency Fund has done over the last few years. That's still running this year. It runs into 2024, but we're starting to think about what will replace MEIF. So we don't yet have announcements to share on that, but if you're thinking what you'd like to ask us about next time, in a few months' time, that would be a good subject to return to. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually meant to ask you what we should be asking about next year. Where would we be? So thanks for preempting. Okay, I will let you leave. Have a good evening, guys.
Thanks, Ken Roy.
Yeah.
Star of the day.
Ken Roy and his assistants.
Is Mary in the wings? Oh. Can I ask the committee to note the report as background to putting questions to the invited guests and note the discussion that we've just had and delegate authority to the chairman in consultation with deputy chair and party group leaders to agree any output arising from the discussion that we just had. Thank you. Right, I'd just like to, everyone's here, so welcome Sylvia, Chris, Naran, Vicky and Mary. Thank you for joining us. Mary, are you going to lead this first?
I think it's me.
I'm going to ask Naran to make the opening statement.
Thank you.
So the first item we're going to discuss is the data incident and the GLA's response.
Thank you very much. So we are in front of you this afternoon to answer your questions and discuss the lessons we have learned as a result of the data incident. As you'll know from our previous discussion with the Police and Crime Committee, this incident was the result of a manual configuration error on the part of a GLA employee in November 2023. We are sorry that this incident occurred and regret any concern which it may cause. The error led to it being technically possible for visitors to the GLA website to see personal information submitted via 2 MOPAC e-forms, information that should have been completely secure. The 2 online web forms affected were one used to enable members of the public to contact MOPAC about issues relating to victims, and the other to contact MOPAC Police Complaints Review Team. The data was visible on account of human error, not on account of any cyber attack or malicious act. MOPAC notified the GLA immediately upon identifying the problem, and the GLA rectified it within minutes before taking down the forms altogether on the 25th of February. We should stress that there is no evidence that any of this information has been accessed by anyone with malicious intent or has been misused. Nonetheless, the vulnerability of some of the data subjects means that our primary focus has been to ensure individual data subjects are safeguarded and supported as appropriate. Since February, we have worked with colleagues in MOPAC to meet our statutory obligations in line with GDPR and to keep the ICO informed of our activity, and we're part of an ongoing investigation by the ICO. We have worked with independent experts to determine the extent to which the data may have been viewed and subsequently shared. They have found no evidence that any of this information has been accessed by anyone, as I said, with malicious intent or has been misused. As a result of the incident, MOPAC have contacted 392 individuals in July to let them know that it is possible that their personal information may have been viewed by people who should not have been able to do so. We want to ensure you that we have fully investigated the incident to understand how it happened and to learn lessons. We have put in place measures that ensure that this error could never happen again and accelerated an existing plan of information governance improvements. As we set out in our paper, there was work already underway in the GLA, led by the Information Governance team, to improve our processes before this incident occurred. Actions taken subsequently are part of the wider work on information governance and the safety and management of the data we hold, and we have increased our investment in this area to accelerate the process. In particular, we have looked at our records management, training improvements, governance improvements to our website, and wider digital improvements. We have also spoken to our senior leadership team and wider digital and are looking really carefully at our mandatory training. The incident is a strong reminder to us that we ensure that we have the right processes and knowledge in the organisation for the personal data we hold. This is why we work on information governance continues, including our records management improvement. We have today brought along other colleagues from relevant parts of the organisation with anything from a technical nature that you may want to ask us. Thank you.
Thank you. Naren, one of the things you said there's in your papers and through the statement, we should now know what happened. A manual configuration error, which
yes.
Is to do with permissions, is the simple way of saying that somebody pressed the wrong button?
Yeah, it was absolutely a human error, yes.
So it's just on a web form when you're setting something up to post to a website, you select on permissions and you've pressed public instead of private?
It was the permissions that were set on the web form incorrectly, yes, that's correct.
Okay. I mean, and there's not really, is there any way to mitigate that really?
Yes, and we have done some mitigation, and I can bring Vicky in just to talk about the mitigation that we put in place as a result of that.
Yes, so we've done several things to enhance our security posture. In the back end, the content management system where the permission setting was, that has now been locked down and is restricted, so that won't happen again without the right protocols being followed.
Surely it's open to somebody, I imagine.
Yes, but at senior level.
Okay. So not people that would be posting every day?
No.
Okay. Was that all? Okay. And the other thing that I wanted to come back to Naren as well, you said there's no evidence that anyone has accessed this information with malicious or intent or misused the information. Does that mean there's no evidence that it's being viewed by other people, or just there's a degree of separation between people that have been defined as having malicious intent and not?
Yes. So just to say that we have we are some independent investigators to ensure that this evidence hadn't been misused in any way. That's not to say, because it was open to the public, that's not to say that people would not have viewed the information. But as we understand it from the work that we have done with investigators, that we do not believe that that information has been misused in any way. And just to also say as well, through the contact that we have had with individuals that have contacted us, we have no evidence that that information has been misused. And in addition, we have also provided those individuals with access to a credit reference agency for 12 months to ensure that their information is not used for any financial misuse or purposes of any kind.
Thank you. So it may have been viewed.
Yes, I mean it was on our the information was open to the public for that period of time.
And is there any hits on the website in general, or on that page, that you would be able to give a number on how many people would have viewed that?
So we're limited, and I'll bring Vicky in a moment. There is work that we did at the time around Google Analytics, but Google Analytics also has its limitations. But I can bring Vicky in just to
it will show you how many times a page has been viewed.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, but there are limitations to, so we can see when people have accepted cookies, then we can see what access, but if people deny cookies, then we wouldn't be able to get that information via Google Analytics. But via the Google Analytics information that we do have, we know that the majority of them through investigation are likely to be staff access.
But just on that, how many hits did Google Analytics say the page had?
Well, there are multiple pages, so it would be multiple. But we can come back with those statistics.
Okay. Are we talking in the tens? Are we talking in the hundreds? Are we talking in the thousands?
As I understand it, and we do have the figures, I don't have them in front of me, unfortunately. I think it was in the tens as opposed to in the hundreds or in the thousands.
It was low numbers.
It was really low numbers, but we can come back to you because we've got the breakdown of that information.
Okay. And is that how you've established that nobody had malicious intent? Because you can pretty much say that there's 10 people, 12 views on this page, say, and we know that it was accessed by X amount of GLA staff or MOPAC staff. Is that pretty much how you're saying that assessment's being made?
So the investigators that looked at this, they have multiple tools, and what they can, in terms of kind of what they can do, they can look and kind of track whether or not any of this data is on the internet or being used in any way.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just add to that we've also not just done that once. We've conducted three investigations over 3 time periods to ensure that, not just a moment in time, that data has been accessible. So we've commissioned that security review, which has come up positively on all three occasions.
Assembly Member Russell.
Thank you, and thank you for the information that you've given about this, because it is obviously a really serious thing that people's data is available in a way that it shouldn't be. I just want to go back to the original kind of mistake, i.e. setting up the permissions incorrectly. Because if you think back to that period when the website was being transferred over, a lot of us on the Assembly had some kind of difficult experiences with the way that the new website got set up. And I think from our sort of use of the website experience, nobody talked to any of the political groups, at least not our group. Sort of obviously can't speak for the other groups, but I think it applied to all of us, about how we use the website. So for instance, there were things around the way the Mayor's Questions database got set up originally that made it just not work, and we were all trying to do our Mayor's Questions and we couldn't filter by member name. And so when that transfer went over, our impression was that not enough thinking had gone into the purpose of each part of the website and how it works and how people use it. And so I'm just wondering if you're doing any thinking about the purpose of the website and your governance of the way the technical things are done. So you can just imagine someone just setting up the permissions thinking they were doing the right thing, but not understanding that the data that was being collected on those web forms was personal data, and that there would be a real risk around that being made available to people accidentally. And so I just wonder, what work you're doing around sort of governance to make sure that future mistakes aren't made, because there is a gap in understanding between the people who are doing the technical job and the people within the GLA who are actually using the website for their work.
There's lots of work that had already started and is ongoing and accelerated, as Niran said, in information management. For us in the digital space, along with the records of processing activities updating that we've been doing, we've also done a full sweep across all of the web forms and all of the data that we hold. We've updated all of the data protection impact assessments on all of that, and we're putting new processes in place to ensure that when new requests come in, we have a really robust way of ensuring that the right training's done, we're collecting the right data in the right ways, for the right reasons, for the right amount of time as well. So we've updated the retention policies as well. We've also done some in-depth information management training for all people in the digital experience unit, and included the CIU, the City Intelligence Unit too, and we're hoping to roll out something similar across the organisation where people are involved in using the website to collect personal information. So we've done a lot of work and also included, we're updating the way that we escalate privileges, so that we're making sure that people are signing the right declarations, that they've had the right mandatory training and refreshment training, and we're also have updated our incident management protocols as well, because obviously managing this incident has also taught us a lot, and we've made sure that we've got really robust processes in place if an incident of this nature should happen again. Which we hope not to. But I think overall, yes, that's been at the heart of what we're trying to do. We're trying to not allow anything of this nature to happen again. And that responsibility just doesn't stop with us on the technical side. As you say, we need to ensure it's a culture piece across the organisation, which Sylvia in information governance is leading on.
Nuran, did you want to?
Yeah, I did. Just wanted to say that, firstly to apologise. I know that the experience that members had, and and I remember. I think I was here before where you talked about where things weren't working for you, and I think there is. Firstly, there is something about the kind of size and scale of the project that was undertaken. This was a 3-year project. It was multiple sites that were coming together. So the scale of it was not small. But we, as Vicky has said, we have certainly learnt lessons, not just from this incident, but actually in the way we involved people across the organisation in the build of the website. So that is something that we absolutely get. And one of the things I would say is that now, in terms of kind of our focus on digital, it is about the user experience, which we have to put at the heart, but it is also about the experience of people within the organisation and how they're actually using our technology.
So, because Vicky, you gave lots of examples of the very, good, robust processes that you've got in place. You didn't describe anything much about that kind of relationship between the users of the website and the kind of tech team that are making changes and making sure that the website is working. So have you made, are there from your end, from that sort of digital end, are there kind of changes to your processes that kind of take on board how particular parts of the website are being used and what the purpose of that is?
Absolutely. We are really focused, as Niran said, on user-centric design, data-driven decision-making. We want to be a digital-first organisation, and to do that we need to listen to the communities to which we serve, to which we support and enable. We're doing several things. We've got a community of practice, particularly around the user experience that we've set up. At the moment, it's kind of focused on kind of internal GLA staff, but we're looking to hopefully open up user groups where we can gather information. In turn, we're also in the process of working with our colleagues in external relations and other areas with regard to updating the content strategy. So how do we want to engage with our communities, both externally and internally, to ensure that our products are fit for purpose? I always describe digital as being like, if you think of IT as the engine of a car, think of digital as of the experience of driving the car. So it's really important that we understand everybody's needs so that we can create the right experiences for people. So I'm happy to take an action to ensure that your group is spoken to soon.
Sorry, I've got one more. So I think you said 392. Niran, you said 392 people had their personal information potentially viewable. Are you content that all of those people that you've been in contact and you're comfortable that their data is safe and that they feel supported?
Absolutely. So, as you may be aware, we set up a contact centre immediately after we sent out notifications, both via email and by Royal Mail as well. During that process, we had about 104 calls to the contact centre over that 28-day period. That was for 76 individuals. We did have some repeat callers. We put that was a specialist contact centre to provide advice and support. People have also had the ability to put in subject access requests in terms of kind of the data that we hold on them, and so those have been directed to MOPAC. So MOPAC have been handling them. We have had some follow-up calls which MOPAC have been dealing with, and we continue to have really small numbers of contact now that come in directly into MOPAC. At the time, we also offered people access to Mind, which was a counselling organisation, and we did have a very small number. I think it was about 5 people in total that took that up. And as I said before, we also offered the credit checking service to every person that we did get in contact with. So where we've had to provide some additional support, and sometimes that's been interpreters. So we have done that too. So where people, it may not have been their English, may not have been their first language, and they've come to us to get more information, then we've also found interpreters to help us explain to them exactly what has happened. And what I should say is that we have worked with the ICO. We have completely undertaken our legal obligation in terms of contacting all 392 of those individuals.
And just by what you just said about some of the people needing interpreters, so this sounds like some of these people were particularly vulnerable. Are you comfortable that you have made sure that all of those people are well looked after?
To the extent that we can, in terms of there will be some people that won't want to come forward or won't want to come and speak to us because of the, as I described earlier, just the nature of the data. These were the most vulnerable individuals, and for that we are deeply sorry. And what has been important is that when they did contact us and they were able to obviously speak to us, we provided numbers, a number and also email addresses, because there are different ways in which people want to contact us, that they were able to do so. For the first weekend, actually, we kept the contact centre open. As I said, we kept that contact centre open for 28 days, but people can still contact us. There is an email address that they can come through. As I said, for those that did, I know, and I speak on behalf of MOPAC, I know that there was care and consideration given to those individuals that did contact us. Like I said, we did have some repeat callers, who may not have got the information they wanted the first time, who may wanted more information and more comfort. We also, as part of this, did contact a number of our stakeholders in terms of kind of charities and that sort of thing, just in case people, they saw a spike in people contacting them, so we did engage with them as well.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got an indication from Assembly Member Fortune and then Assembly Member Bacon.
Very, very quick one. The member of staff who miskeyed, who I'm sure is mortified, what level of seniority are they at?
They were a relatively junior member of staff.
So that's the key of my question: is, are we happy that people have got sufficient or adequate seniority when they're accessing information?
So that is what we have now amended as part of our lessons learned. Yes, and just to say, we conducted a very thorough investigation when this incident happened.
Okay, and that's across the piece, Mary, as well. That's not just around data access, around this specific project.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting sort of extension of it, isn't it? So I think, as you can see and hear, we have focused down very hard on the reasons this occurred and the implications, immediate implications. And as you say, staff who then find themselves in this position, it's not only worrying for them, but also they worry too about what's then going to happen to them, and so we've tried to, support people. It raises a broader question about the support and cover that we give more junior staff, particularly when by making such mistakes it can have such a devastating impact potentially. I think it's fair to say, Assembly Member Fortune, we haven't yet extended our thinking to that. We haven't taken our thinking to that yet. We're still managing the our response really to this particular incident, but it is something that we should think on, definitely.
And it's feeling reassured that the appropriate people have got access at the appropriate level. That's the
exactly, and that's a big lesson from
Sorry,
this.
would you mind if I just came in as well? And just to say that the work that Sylvia is doing around records management that we refer to, this is work that was going on even before the incident, but this is about kind of what data do we hold in the organisation, who has access to that data, and how that data is appropriately being managed. So as Mary has indicated, there is work going on, and there is ongoing work going on to ensure that that this doesn't occur again.
Thanks. Just a couple of quick questions, that sort of clarifications coming up from previous lines of questioning, one of which is back to the question of who could access and how easy it was to access this information. I'm trying to get a grip of it through previous questioning. So it's not just that if you didn't, so staff could access it because they knew what they were looking for. If you, as a member of the public, came across the page because presumably you were actually trying to fill out the web form, where was this button, this link that could accidentally take you to all this information? Was that something that people could have accidentally, or would you really, in your assessment, would you really have had to be a member of staff to go, that's what I want and that's where I'm going?
So I'm going to perhaps bring Chris in just one moment, but just to say that this wasn't on the front page of our website or anywhere else.
It was a separate page.
It was in a very separate page.
To be public rather than behind.
Absolutely, like you would have had to have looked quite hard onto our website to actually find it. It wasn't. There wasn't a link to the front page or anything else. But I'll bring Chris in terms of kind of what it looked like.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Yes. So on that web form, as you mentioned, the top left-hand corner of that was a results button. If you clicked into there, you could then navigate into further submissions and then view the submission data there.
Right. Okay. So it's possible that people could have stumbled on it accidentally, but you would really have had to be pressing a lot of weird buttons. Okay, thanks. That's helpful to sort of understand from the scope. Just something that I don't, and apologies if I've missed it. So obviously you notified the OCO within absolutely as quickly as possible once you found out about it. How quickly did you start notifying the people who were affected? Apologies if this is here and I've missed it, but I can't see it.
No, so it was a while, and there was a very specific reason for that. So we discovered this in February, and we didn't notify till July, and the reason for that is because there was work that we needed to do to fully understand the people that whose data may have been accessed. We had to conduct as part of our investigations, and like I said, we did this with the knowledge of the ICO, was that we conducted a number of risk assessments. This was work that MOPAC essentially did, because this is MOPAC data, and that took quite a while to go through. So and also we needed to be absolutely clear how we were going to contact these individuals, because of the vulnerability of these individuals as well. So some of those individuals would have there were essentially two types of notification that were sent. One just to contact us, another which provided more detail. Some people were contacted via email. So there was just a lot of careful consideration that needed to happen before we could make contact with those individuals, and absolutely understand that feels like a long time from February to July, and I absolutely understand that, but there was a huge amount of work going on in that time with MOPAC, and MOPAC going through each of those data subjects in terms of kind of contact and how contact was going to be made.
And I know that PCC are looking this as well, but that, you're right, it does feel like a long time. And just finally, you said that people whose data has been was affected are going to get 12 months access to Credit Reference Agency to make sure that. Is that long enough, considering, okay, you don't believe it's gone anywhere, you don't believe it's being stored anywhere, this information or anything else, but presumably there is a possibility that it's there and could be used in the future. Is 12 months enough?
So we took advice on this. So all the way through this, we have taken advice from experts in the space, and that, you know, we were told that 12 months felt like the right amount of time. That is something that we can absolutely keep under review, but that was the advice that we were given.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Back to you, Jo.
Thank you. I think that everybody is done on questions for this. With that being said, can I ask the committee to note the GLA response to the data incident? Noted. And I think everyone's leaving, aren't they? It's just Helen that's coming. Thank you, Niran. And Chris, Sylvia, sorry, did you want to say anything? I feel bad that you came.
I might actually, since you're giving me the chance, I might just come back on Assembly Member Russell's point. I just want to be clear that there was a robust programme in place to assess the requirements of yourselves and your staff as part of the rebuild project. We held a number of websites with what we call the CMS users, the users of the website. We had 3 or 4 sessions there to understand their requirements, and we had subsequent surveys that went out to staff, subsequent engagement sessions. Well, I've taken clearly those that we need to work directly with your office and your offices to ensure that any future adjustments are taken into account. So we'll put some focus on that. Specifically on MQT as well, we have a model in place where we work with what we call a product owner, so someone that is responsible for the platform. That platform was launched about a month after london.gov. So we worked incredibly closely with them to ensure they got everything that they needed from that. However, yes, there were some issues that we needed to address after its launch.
Yeah, I didn't raise that because I wanted to have a moan about that process. I raised it because of the possibility that sort of thinking about how the website gets used might have contributed to the situation with the kind of the way that that decision, the fatal decision got made to change that setup. But so I kind of absolutely wasn't trying to say, oh, we're very hard done by. But thank you for looking at it, because I do think it is worth looking at, and I do think there are lessons to be learned from it, just about how the websites do get used in this building for the particular purposes, like, you know, the timelines of when MQT meetings are, and yeah. So thank you for picking that up.
Absolutely, no problem.
Thanks. And I will moan, I think the MQT page is awful and it's so hard to use, and it's, apart from the lovely picture of you, Ellie, that I get to see every time I go on there. Apart from, I have no idea. You're the chosen one. But yeah, no, thank you, Chris. But I think maybe that's one for another day. But I do think that the MQT needs a massive update.
No worries. We'll look at it. Yeah, thank you.
Are you staying? Okay, lovely. I'd like to welcome Helen Ewan, Executive Director for Assembly Secretariat, who's joined us for the quarterly finance report. Did you want to say anything briefly, please?
Very briefly, Chair, if I can. Just by way of introduction, this is the first time I've brought a report of this nature to the committee. The Oversight Committee typically considers Assembly budgetary matters twice a year, around November time, when we're starting to think about the propositions for the coming year's budget for the Secretariat, and then again typically in March, April time, when you are asked to approve proposals for the allocation of the Secretariat budget. Certainly in recent years you have not received regular reports on Secretariat spend. I think it would be sensible and appropriate for us to bring you more regular information, and so that you can scrutinise the Secretariat's budget on a more regular basis. So today I think my question is that something that you would welcome and find helpful? If so, is the format that we have provided in the first report here today useful? I think it's worth saying that because this is a Q1 report, it inevitably is at this point in the cycle fairly high level. We will, if you are content, we will come back in November with Q2. I would expect that to include more detailed projections around underspends towards end year. So, as ever, in Q1, more limited information to provide, but we would expect, if you are comfortable, there to be a richer discussion as we move through the financial year. I've also said in the report that we are proposing to do some additional work to think about how we present performance information to you alongside the financial information. That is more complex because of the nature of how we measure the performance of a scrutiny body like ours, but I think it's something that we ought to be looking at, and we'll bring proposals to you in due course.
Thank you. I think certainly on the first point about wanting to know whether it's helpful, I think the committee would say yes to answer that question. I don't know about the format if people have comments on that. I know Assembly Member Boff has indicated.
Very simple question. If we do get on the next report and we have still a surplus for whatever reasons, does that open the door for more rapporteurships?
I would expect to come to you with an explanation of why those underspends have arisen, and with consideration from the budget leads as to how that money might be deployed. We would want to discuss with members how that money could be usefully redeployed. I'm sure rapporteurships is something that would be in the mix, and as you know, we're going to come to members with proposals for how we manage that process in general.
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't really need to tell where the underspends come from, but if you walk up into the Maria Celeste that is the Conservative Group office, you realise there's been some stark staff turnovers, which means we must be saving money somewhere.
Has there? I hadn't noticed.
well, probably that shared HR service that we're still looking for, Andrew, might come in helpful if there is a Marie Celeste situation. And no doubt those positions will be filled very quickly, just as they are everywhere else in the building.
Chair, if it's helpful, I can say that one of the things we are looking hard at is how we very much more actively use underspends in year to provide the additional cover that we need within our teams.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think it's certainly on the rapporteurships, I know it's something that grinds members' gears. I know that Assembly Member Cooper, I remember from our last Oversight Committee, you've planned an international venture that we want to find out about as soon as it's available. So, yeah, that may be a possible way forward. But I think the general note from us would be that this is a good thing to have. Certainly something in addition on performance, while I understand your concerns to be amazing. I think the format for me was good, and I don't hear any indications from others, so I think it would be good to go forward as we are. With that in mind, can I ask the committee to note the quarterly budget position and forecasts of the London Assembly Secretariat? Thank you, Helen. I'm moving on to the London Assembly Work Programme.
Do you want me to say it on the webcast as well?
Well, I'm prepared for it now, so I won't have that same anxiety that I had earlier if you do.
Well, I'm delighted to see that our next meeting is going to cover the shared HR and shared IT services, and I shall look forward to finding out more about them and their existence.
Thank you, Assembly Member Cooper. So can we can ask the committee to note with delight and excitement the London Assembly Work Programme for 23-24, and also note next item being to note the Oversight Work Programme for 23-24. And the next meeting will be on the 1st of November 2023 at 10 a.m. in the chamber at City Hall. I have no other urgent business, so this meeting is done.
This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority.